Hello, weavers. Today I'm going to talk to you about the multiple types of materials that we can use to create textiles. What's really cool is textiles are made from any number of different things. So we're going to cover things both high tech and low tech today. It's a good chance to introduce you to things like a protein fiber. So protein fibers are anything that comes from an animal's. Another fiber here, so this is something called wool roving. And this is blended, actually my version is blended with a little bit of silk and it has a lot of reflectivity you could maybe see here. But one thing that's pretty cool about wool is it always has something called a staple length. And it's fun to think about what a staple of, or the length of the fiber from where it starts on the animal to the end. So many of you have seen sheep and camels and llamas and all of these different things provide different types of wool. And that can be spun. So if you look in my hand right now, I can just take a bit of it and start spinning it. And guess what we have pretty soon is our first strong thread. So the spin is what helps make the yarn strong. Now this would just be what we call one ply. And so it has some strength and you can see it's getting tighter and tighter and finer. And that's pretty awesome. But until we ply it with another yarn, it doesn't get truly strong enough to use maybe within the warp of a textile, a woven textile in particular. So spinning the long staple fiber of wool could get you some thread, but we're going to talk about some other protein fibers here that maybe you already know about, but here's another one that stands out and you'll see it's lustrous and beautiful and spun, and perhaps you know it as silk. So silk is another protein fiber. It comes from silkworms who eat mulberries. So it's interesting to think about where materials come from and how their chemical compositions are derived, because mulberry is the plant that is what silkworms feed on. And we can create sort of a synthetic silk by using the mulberry plant. So that's pretty interesting. And I'll show you some pictures of silkworms and their production. So we have two protein fibers here. They're both derived from animals, and those are the two to point out. But the other ones here we have are all cellulose, and one is synthetic. So now I'm going to talk about those. So here we have cotton. As many of you know, cotton comes from a plant, and it's actually the flower or the boll of the cotton plant. A very popular textile good or fiber because we like wearing cotton. It's very breathable. And so that's going to be our warp thread. It's very, it's plied, which means you can sort of untwist it and see that there's more than one ply twisting it together. Next up, I'm going to jump to something really unusual. Here, it kind of feels plasticky. It's very strange, but actually it's spun kudzu. So kudzu in the United States is an invasive plant, but believe it or not, it can be used, and it's not invasive in Asia, it actually is from Asia. It can be spun, and we take the bast fibers or the long fibers generally of the plant's stalk material, and we make that into a spun yarn. Here we have a hand spun hemp. So again, it has kind of a crude feel, maybe especially compared to the silk, but hemp is a really cool, another bast fiber, which means it's derived from the stalk of the plant. And it's kind of rough. It makes a really nice, ropes and lines and cords, but also we could make it finer and finer and get something very close to linen. So linen is a fiber we love to wear, especially in the summer. It's very breathable. We use it for tablecloths, things like that. So this is a hand spun hemp in a natural color. Now we have two sort of interesting fibers yet to cover here. This is a linen that comes from Japan. It's kind of a flat tape, and it's produced not through spinning. It has a different production method that's sort of hard to understand. But if you kind of look through it, you'll see, oh, it's a woven tape. So that's pretty cool. And it's kind of flat and a little bit matte. So this we got from Japan. And then finally, we have this really cool synthetic thread, which is actually, again, a tape in that it's flat, and it's called reflective thread or reflective yarn. And so somehow the manufacturer coats tiny, tiny glass beads onto both sides of this material and then cuts it into strips that we can then use as thread. So you'll see after we weave this, or even now, you could take a picture of this with a flash of your camera and it will light up really bright. It's very reflective. And you'll see this in use a lot on safety gear. So you'll see it on highways, construction workers will have it embedded into their uniforms, things like that. But we're excited to use all of these here today.